Hello Internet, and welcome back to Carolina Cars. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at some of the things that I did to prep for the removal of the M30 engine out of my 1990 BMW E34 535i. So as you can see from the picture, the whole front end is taken off. You can take a look at my previous video to see how I did that. And I also have some other things that I did off camera, such as removing the drive shaft, the shift linkage, and the transmission mounts as well, which are all underneath the car and were pretty hard to see. So that's all been done as well. So if you stay tuned here, you'll see everything else that I did to disconnect everything in order to get the engine out. Eventually this engine will hopefully end up in my E34 when I do the engine transplant project, but that's going to be an ongoing process. Hope you enjoy and stay tuned. Okay, so we're back here with the BMW E34 engine removal project. Just a few things I did off camera that I didn't get to probably in the last video. You got this AC condenser that kind of just drops out when you undo all the bolts. A couple of fittings down here. They connect to these things here, some tubes, and then the fan just has to get unplugged. Can't really see that, but it's pretty self-explanatory. A couple of bigger lines here. This one was a pain. It's probably the high pressure side, but not actually sure. It hit that with a pretty big pipe wrench and a little hammering action. The smaller one came off more easily. Over here is where the power steering pump was. It's not there anymore. Power steering pump lines, I should say. Because I see the bolt there where those were disconnected. Not sure if I can leave the power steering pump on. Probably will, but they may have to come off as well. Hopefully not. Backside bolt there. Looks pretty difficult. Yeah, not too bad. So the lines at least are off the pump. Another thing that I did earlier was that the intake air box and all that stuff disconnected the plug wire from the coil. It runs to the distributor, so all the plug wires should be off. Now I got to work on getting all the other connections off here. So probably going to start with throttle cables. And then look at some of these fuel lines and things as well. For some reason somebody zip tied this throttle cable on, maybe because it's about to disintegrate. It's pretty old, so I have to cut those. Also handily in this area is the vacuum line for the brake booster as well, so I'll probably get that. So rather than messing with trying to take apart all this stuff, I'm just going to unbolt the whole thing here. 2 bolts. Hopefully I can get at this other one. Well, I have to use a crescent wrench for that, but hopefully the whole throttle cable carrier situation will come free then. This is the strangest hose clamp on one of the fuel lines here. I have no idea if that's stock or not, but there's no... If it's Allen. Don't know if I'm gonna be able to get that off. Already had to cut some of these lines just because they're a pain, and I'm not gonna be using them again, or I'll be using new lines. So another strange thing. More information about the weird hose clamp. It's some sort of tamper protection. This plastic thing on the outside will come off, revealing a strange fitting, which is somewhat unusual looking and not like a normal hose clamp. I don't know, weird. Lines are off. I'm also going to try to get the probably the positive terminal on the starter off as well. So I was an idiot and ended up snapping the connection to the starter solenoid. You can see there's some broken plastic. Not too worried about it because I will be changing that whole assembly The plastic was brittle, that's my excuse, but it will be getting a new starter once the engine is pulled out of the car. So that's just a hard to reach space, and sometimes stuff happens. What I want to tackle is the coolant expansion tank. There's one hose here, and it looks like there's a clip there, and then or bolt, I should say. Another one over here you can't really see. And then there's just a level sensor, and then hopefully once I undo that hose clamp, it will lift out. Now that the coolant tank is out, there's this like sort of octopus nest situation going on here with all the coolant lines to the fancy dual zone climate control, which is just makes it more of a headache when you have to take it apart. But I think it's just I just can get this hose here, as I spill coolant everywhere. That one, and then there's a hose here which I'm jiggling. Hopefully that frees it up from the engine. The rest of them are buried underneath the exhaust, or the intake manifold rather, so you can't even get to them. Wobbler extension here to get at those clamps right up against the firewall. So in the end I didn't waste my time trying to pull those hoses off and just cut them again, because I'm not going to be using them again, and it was a major pain to try to get them off. Next up is the wiring harness, which is a little bit confusing, but some of these plastic bolts just hold this metal tray thing slash like protector bracket, I don't know what you call it, so that comes out. Now I'm going to delve into the connections that go into the fuse box over here, and then there's this diagnostic port thingy as well. And then over there is where all the computers are, so that's going to be probably the biggest challenge to dope out. Probably going to have to cut out the rest of this climate control monstrosity. So further updates coming. So with this thing out of the way, I now have more easy access to the two. Sort of looms off the wiring harness, you can say. They both kind of terminate these two round things. To be the diagnostic plug, there's this cap that screws off, and a round collar thing that kind of unscrews, and then once that happens, you can kind of push the thing down out of the little holder, and I'm assuming this other one works the same way. We'll see. On more close inspection, there's actually two wiring harnesses. This is kind of the main one, which is that lower one, and then this one which connects over to the engine. You can see how that goes down there, and it's separate from the rest of it. This runs like a cruise control and a bunch of other stuff. This harness ties in right here where I cut it. Main wiring harness, trying to power this is going to be a headache for me later. But I may have to end up changing the whole harness off of this engine to a late E34 based 635 harness, so that I can actually plug into the fuse box and power supply situation. But that'll be a major job for later. Next I'm going to go and try to pull the computer, which is in here, and mates up on this side via some kind of rubber grommet thing. So that'll be the last of the major electrical connections. I'm going to try to pull the engine with the harness, and then go from there. So in order to try to get the wiring harness out of the computer zone here, I've pulled all the computers, which are now up there. I'm going to try to pull this rubber grommet through, but I got to try to remove this tray first. It's an aluminum tray. Let's see here, that's where the cruise control and other stuff goes in. And then the engine wiring harness is below it. And that feeds right in. So I'm going to see if I can pull the whole thing as a unit, maybe. Okay, so once you get all the computers out, and I had to disconnect this ignition coil here. It usually sits over in this little area off of those two studs. And there's two more terminals there that have to get dealt with. But once those are disconnected, then you can kind of work on this big rubber grommet which plugs into the side here. There's a big hole. Eventually you can kind of pull the harness back just enough to sneak the connector for the Motronic. This big thing will fit through the little hole here, the little archway, as well as this thing. You have to pull the fuel pump relay and a couple relays. One is a fuel pump relay. Those two have to get pulled off, and then you can sneak both of those through. I've left the cruise control, some other stuff in there. So the thing is, I think it's left the cruise control. That part of the harness is staying in here for now. Things that need to get removed are the ground strap. There's a connection over here, way down in there. Can't really see. There's the connector there, pointing at. I think that is for the Servotronic, the power steering, but I'm not sure. But that's going to get pulled as well, and I think it should be ready to roll. Okay, so at this point you should have pretty much everything that is connected to the engine off, other than the motor mounts. By this point, the engine was just hanging by the motor mounts, and actually was resting up against the firewall, the back part of it, so it was slightly tilted up. So it should be ready to be pulled. Take a look around the engine compartment with a flashlight. Just make sure there's nothing left connected, because when you do pull it, things will break if you forget something. So go back through and see what I disconnected, and also just use your common sense to make sure that you don't have anything still attached to the engine when you're ready to pull. So I'm going to pull the engine and transmission as a unit, and you'll see that in the next part of the video, which will be a separate post here. So as always, thanks again for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Do YouTubey things, and I'll see you in part 2.